Hey everyone, so today's video is going to be on Martome. She's on one of the advanced summon banners right now, so for 400 you're guaranteed to get her, but you do have a 300% chance. Now, I would not summon on, a banner like this outside of an event, where you can't get books or anything like that, so I would not recommend this. But I will say that this hero, I think, is vastly underrated. She's very, very good. The problem is she's kind of outclassed by other people where she's supposed to be, a specialist. So let's take a look at her and then we'll talk about where she thrives, okay? So Martome here, I've got mine just at 60, no ascensions, no books or anything like that. So she has this trait called Blood Cursed, and it's an aura that says when a team member applies bleeding, it increases the effect's duration by 1 round. So it increases the stack, on the bleeding, which is very strong because she pairs with a lot of other really good heroes that take advantage of additional stacks of bleeding. And then it says when an ally applies bleeding with an active attack, has 50% chance to launch a joint attack with the basic ability. And what happens is whenever she's ascended, she will always launch a joint attack. This is actually a really big boost to her Ascension 5. It's a bit of a bummer, that is what the Ascension is. If this was like 100% chance on the basic, and then, maybe an extra round of bleeding stack or something like that on the A5, I think a lot more people would use her just because she's a little too RNG. But regardless, still a really good trait, puts up a lot of stacks of bleeding, and then she also has a chance to come in and do a joint attack with her basic, which also puts up a stack of bleeding. So it deals 100% damage to an enemy and applies 1 stack of bleeding for 2 rounds, and if there are no other enemies, it additionally applies an additional stack of bleeding. So she just keeps stacking, right? So she also has a passive, which passives always tend to be really good. It says on active attacks, if the target has more than 6 stack of bleeding, launches a bonus attack with Crimson Whip up to 1 time per round. So if Martome attacks somebody and they have 6 stack of bleeding on them already, she will launch a bonus attack with this ability, which deals 150% damage to 1 enemy and then removes 1 positive effect in them and reduces the ultimate ability's cooldown by 1 turn. Pretty cool stuff. So she'll be able to loop back around to her ultimate ability a lot more, considering each round she should get this passive off. There should always be 6 stack of bleeding up whenever you're using Martome in a team to reduce the ultimate ability cooldown. So let's talk about the ultimate ability. So Fatal Whip, it deals 200% damage to an enemy and applies 2 stacks of bleeding to them for 2 rounds and detonates all bleeding stacks on them. If there are no other enemies left, the bleeding stacks will not be removed after detonation. This is an absolutely amazing skill. Great skill. This does a lot of damage, especially if she is put in the right team where you're just stacking a crap ton of bleedings everywhere. The nice thing is, and I don't know if anybody has caught on yet or not, but she is a specialist for guild boss and then bosses in guild versus environment, where you're attacking a single enemy, because that's where her ultimate ability is fantastic, because she's going to detonate all of the bleeding stacks, but because there's no other enemies left, the stacks don't get removed. So the next time she loops back around to her ultimate, she's doing just as much amount of damage. So really nice. So before we talk about the stats, we're just going to talk about the bleeding mechanic. So bleeding says after each ability cast takes true damage equal to the applier's attack. So there's 2 other forms of, there's actually more forms of damage over time, but there's 3 main ones, right? There's bleeding, there's poison, and then there's ignite. So poison does true damage equal to the enemy's max health. This is actually extremely strong, and it's been nerfed, on higher dungeons where it doesn't really apply, and there's bosses in the game that are unaffected by poisons, rightfully so, because that whole mechanic is actually a little backwards in my opinion. But it is what it is. Ignite is the other one that's usually on fire heroes. And Ignite also applies damage equal to the attack of the person that put it on, but it can crit. So bleedings actually can't crit, to my knowledge. So the bleeding damage is all based off of the attack of the hero, okay? So with that being said, I still have Martome built in damage just because I want her to hit hard even on her basic and her ultimate outside of the bleeding burst, where most of the damage comes in, but every little bit counts. So ideally, I would have her at level 70. I would have like 1 ascension on her or something like that. That would be really cool to boost her attack, which would really enhance her damage. But I have her really slow. I just want as much damage as possible. I want her, towards the back of the turn order because I want 6 stacks up on the boss before she attacks because I want her to be using this Crimson Whip every time. Okay? For the gear, I just have a bunch of broken pieces on her. Enough focus and then just the crit rate and crit damage for her to be able to apply debuffs. So that's really all I got going. And I guess for the glyphs, she gives herself some attack. 19 speed is whatever. Focus is pretty nice. For her masteries, if you ever wanted to book her, she does have the crit damage and crit rate. This is a bit of a bummer. It would have been really nice if she gave herself the 40% attack, to kind of go along with the amount of damage that her bleedings do. But it is what it is. So for her ascension, she'll get attack on the first one. She'll get her speed on 3. And then again, she gets her trait activated, the ascended trait on A5. So let's talk about some people that she actually pairs really well with. The first one I think is going to be fairly obvious, and that is Barclay. So Barclay is a really cool hero in regards to bleed compositions. He has, so he puts up bleeding on somebody at the start of the round. Whenever a team member attacks with bleeding outside of their turn, so, any kind of joint attacks, it triggers bleeding effects on them for an additional time, and then that can only actually happen 10 times per round. He puts up a bunch of stacks of bleeding, and then they kind of trigger bleedings. So he's a great addition, as well as Hyunwoo. So Hyunwoo is your main damage dealer, but he also puts up stacks of bleeding as well. So he's going to be doing additional attacks. He's going to be doing this big AoE with increased damage taken and then applying additional stacks of bleeding. So I will show you my Martome in Guild Boss, which is where I use her. So if you look at other teams here, Martome is somewhat outclassed, by this team here. An Ackerly Maeve and then A5 Aaron or A5 Maeve in a regular Aaron. But in this team here, this is where I think she would be really nice. If you don't have Mikasa from the Attack on Titan composition, I think she's a really good fit in there. So other than that, this is my team. So I will run through the Guild Boss team. I'll edit out this team, and I'll just show you how much damage that Martome actually does, like on her ultimate ability. So I will be right back after we fast forward through all this stuff and get to this team and to the end of this team. We'll slow it down, I think, whenever we get to some ultimate abilities from Martome and stuff like that. But all right, let's jump in here, and I will be back right after this. Okay, so here's our team. Now, I will say it's not really speed tuned well, but I just want to show you the type of damage that Martome can do. So here, on her active attack, we're going to try and get her to do her bonus Crimson Whip thing. So there's the bonus attack. That's that passive ability because the boss had more than 6 stacks of bleeding. So that's the key one. And you see she's doing that every turn. So she's decreased her ultimate ability now by a turn. And you should see some big damage here the next 2 or 3 rounds. So this next hit should be her ultimate ability, and we'll show you how much damage that can actually do. We'll slow it down even. Okay, so the big ultimate's coming up here right after Barclay's hit, and you'll see how much damage this does. It's actually pretty impressive. So here's the ultimate. So 354,000, which is pretty impressive with 65 stacks of bleed. So yeah, like I said, if she's ascended, if she has books, I mean, you're going to do even more damage if you can get her attack stat up. So we're just going to finish out the run here, and we'll show you the overall damage from the rest of the units, and we'll be out of here. All right, catch you at the end. All right, guys, so there you have it. I'll show you the damage output. So obviously Hyun Woo is just pretty nuts, but you know, an A0, right? Unbooked Martome is doing 2.5 million. So pretty cool. You know, as I showed earlier, her ultimate ability just smacks, and the potential on that is just obviously way higher with higher attacks. Like a higher attack stat, and then obviously if she's A5 and she's just stacking more and more bleeds, crazy damage. So again, underrated. She's very, very good. It's just right now, I think, with broken LDs and things like that, guild versus environment, and then you have, you know, your compositions with poisons and things like that here, just a little outclassed. But I think if she's A5 and then has some books in her, she might be able to compete. But yeah, that's just a quick little, you know, guide on Martome, underrated guild boss and guild versus environment specialist. So definitely a really cool character if you have her, but I wouldn't recommend pulling for her or anything like that just because she is a specialist and she doesn't really advance you in something like Rift of Chaos or Dungeons. So but anyway, that's all I got. So thanks for checking it out. Catch you later.